Hi, my name is Stephanie and I'm with House of Fritz. I am a new YouTube creator and you are watching my very first video and I'm so excited that you're here with me. Today we're going to make a couple of projects and I'm sure that I will learn some things and hopefully you will too. Please feel free to subscribe and to like my video and maybe even share it. That will help my channel get out there and I would be so appreciative of your support in that way. Also, feel free to make any comments if you have any tips for me, and I would love to just connect and get to know my audience. Let's get started. We're going to start with this breadboard. I thrifted it at a local thrift store. I believe that it was just originally a decorative item from probably somewhere like Hobby Lobby. I paid about $3.99 for it, and we're going to start laying down the first coat of paint. I'm using Debi's DIY paint in White Swan, and we're going to put down a couple of coats of paint. I believe this took at least 2, and I'm only putting down enough paint for it to be a base layer for a decoupage paper. We'll be using a rice paper over it, but you definitely want to give a light colored coat of paint for underneath your paper so that the colors pop on your paper once you decoupage it on there. Otherwise, we would see the original image bleed through the paper, so you definitely want to cover that up. And here you're seeing me do a wet tear of the edges of the paper. That way I can kind of get a more natural look. It sort of blends in to your project so that you can make it look a little more natural. Instead of having such a direct, sharp line, this will help blend into any paint you would additionally add around it as a decorative accent. So I am continuing to kind of tear off the edges so that I can get it to be the right size. And now I will take liquid patina from Debi's DIY collection, and I like to use this as my decoupage medium. It's really easy to use, and I've had really good success with it. And so I'm gonna start by putting a starter strip of the decoupage medium at the top so that I can kind of just start adhering the piece. I spritz the paper with some water, just moistening it up so that it will open up the fibers and lay more flatly. And as I have my starter strips started, I will then continue down the board, adding more medium, spritzing the paper, and continuing to decoupage the flag on to the board. I'll do a coat of liquid patina over the top and then smooth it out, and then I'll set it aside to dry. Then I go back in with my red DIY paint. This is Carnival Red. And these are clay-based paints, so you do have to put a top coat over them to finish, but I'm just kind of going in up to the edge of the torn paper because I really do want that kind of torn edge. I kind of want it to be slightly rustic looking and old, and that's what we're building up to. We're going to put a coat of red, Carnival Red paint, and kind of finish off the edge. Eventually I'll finish off the back as well, but I'm just trying to get an even layer of paint over it, and then I believe it took 2 coats of paint as well to cover up the white. And when I get up to the edge of that paper, I sort of just dab it, push it into it. You could use a smaller brush if you find it harder to use a little bit larger brush. That will help you control the paint better. Then I go ahead and use my heat tool to help dry the paint. This paint dries pretty fast, but you do have to have a really good dry coat so that you can continue on with the next steps. Here you'll see me paint the back. I may have only painted 1 coat of paint. I'm drying it. I may have to do some touch up, but it dries really fast with a heat tool. Then I take my finger sander and I'm just going around the edge to distress it. I want it to look old. This is part of the layering process of making something look older and vintage and kind of worn out. Take the finger sander, I rough up the edges, and then I will kind of hit it with a couple of scratches on the surface area as well. Got to be careful of that sanded dust, because if it gets wet, then you could have wet paint smeared everywhere. So I'm taking off a little bit of any dust that's on there and kind of trying to dry it off and clean it so that I can control and don't have any smearing going on. Next, I'm going to take my IOD stamp. It's a crackle stamp, so that I can stamp with the black ink and make it look a little distressed. Kind of gives another layer of an aged look. This IOD stamp comes with 4 different crackle distressed stamps, and I'm just going around and touching it just to add a little bit here and there to make the surface look older than it is. And then after I finish adding all of the crackle age that I add, I'll use a baby wipe to clean off my stamp, to put it away, make sure I get all the ink off. And then I let the ink dry. And now I'm adding clear wax from DIY Products. I love this wax. You add a clear coat. I will be adding a dark wax as well, but you add a clear so that when you go to add the dark, you can control the amount that actually absorbs. So here I'm adding the dark wax. I'm just going to put a little bit, start with a little bit so that I can wipe some of it back and control how much is left on there. And it just helps age the project, and you just want to layer it on. Heavier in some places. The longer you leave it, the more that would absorb. So if you want to control it, you kind of add it and subtract as you go. If I didn't put the clear wax down, a lot of the dark wax would absorb and it would get a lot darker. So you kind of control the deepness of it by adding some of the clear at first. As I'm doing this, I actually noticed that the rice paper was starting to be rubbed a little bit, so I had to be careful how much I went over the rice paper, how much rubbing I did. So you'll see that I kind of stop rubbing in that area, but I take off as much of the dark wax as I want, leaving enough, and it'll absorb over time. You can come back and kind of buff it in, which is what you see me doing. I'm going around the edges. I added it to the back, and you see the kind of a blotchiness, but after it sits and really absorbs, you will notice that that will sort of settle down. It'll sort of even out. Kind of at first when you put on wax, it might even look like a freaked out mess, but you end up, it ends up absorbing and evening out. So here I'm actually taking some ribbons, some new and some vintage hem tape, and I'm just adding it. First I try to add it to the handle by tying it around, and decide I don't necessarily love the placing of that. I do love the look of the softness of the choices that I made, but I go ahead and I use a paintbrush and go ahead and pull it through the hole that's already on the cutting board and tie my bow. And then I just trim the edges of the ribbon. And you kind of want it to be a little bit, uneven, not everything perfectly lengthened the same, so it looks a little more natural. And there we have it, the decorative breadboard. Here I'm gonna create a jar using DOS clay and IOD mold. This is an IOD mold from the new summer collection from IOD. It's called the Chanticleer mold, and it's a rooster. You can actually make two pieces and put them together and make a three-dimensional object. So they are mirror image, and it's a really fun mold to use. So I'm taking my DOS clay and I'm kneading it so it can soften it, and I'm pushing it into the mold. The mold has an edge that has like a rim around it, and it actually is really helpful to push the rest of the clay out, so you can get a smooth finish on the back so that it'll lay level. And then I'm going in and I'm making a couple of the small flourishes so they can be part of the design for the jar. And I didn't mention that when you first start using these molds, if you dust them with cornstarch, it actually makes getting your clay molds out of the mold itself a lot easier. And then here I decide that I'm going to take a layer of the clay and roll it out, kind of like you were rolling dough, so that I can cover up part of the jar that I'm going to use. So I put down some cornstarch and I'm just kind of mashing some clay, and in a minute I'll use my brayer. It's a roller that can help flatten it out. I put some cornstarch on it so that nothing sticks. That's really helpful to, it's almost like dusting your surface with flour so that nothing sticks. And then I pull out this new stamp. It's called the Waltz stamp. It's also from the IOD summer collection. It's really cool. I'm so excited to have this sheet music stamp. And I go ahead and I push it into the clay so that it makes an indentation, and it creates a pattern in the clay. So I take my clay and then I pull my jar over to see where I want to place it. And this is just a basic jar. It's a newer jar, ball jar, but you could use an old pickle jar. You could use anything, whatever size you want. And I'm putting on some Type-On Quick and Thick. It's the adhesive that I like to use with the clay. It's really strong and it dries a little bit quicker. It holds really great to all surfaces. So I spread it out, and I really want to make sure I get some of the glue to the edges because you just really want it to hold everything on. And so I place the clay on the jar, and I add a little piece up at the top. I'm not looking for it to be perfect. I'm not looking for the jar to be fully wrapped in the clay. So I just make sure I push the edges around to where I want it. And now I'm putting the glue on my rooster mold. I place the mold where I want it, and I push down the bottom edge. It's kind of a thicker bottom because really you can sandwich two of them together and literally stand it as like a figurine if you wanted to do that. And so in order for it not to stand out as much on the bottom, I go ahead and push it down. And now I'm going to glue the flourishes on. Put some glue on there and smooth that out, and then I place those where I want them on the jar. Just adds a little touch. We could have added more to make the design even more complicated or more detailed. So I place those and push them down. You want to make sure you push it enough that it's really made contact. Now I am getting out the paint color that I'm going to use. This is Crinoline by DIY, and it has been sitting a while, so I'm really stirring it up to make sure that I get it like really well mixed, and I'm adding some to a cup. I'm going to use this product called Salt Wash, and I'm adding probably pretty close to equal parts salt wash and paint to make a really thick paint mixture. And I'm doing this so that I can cover the back of the jar without using so much clay. So I'm just stippling a layer of this paint with the salt wash in. And this paint color, the Crinoline color, is kind of a creamy cream color with a yellow undertone. And so I'm stippling it down just to create a base to cover the glass. You'll still see kind of the indentation of, you know, the numbers on the glass. And on the other side, I covered up the words and any other design. But I'm going to put this paint base on, and I'm going to let it dry. I start to go around the edges, but realize that salt wash is actually going to cover up the impression that I made with the stamp. It'll fill it in. So I decide to kind of go back through and take a little bit of it off right around the edge and switch to just the basic paint. And DIY paint is pretty thick on its own. So when I do start to paint the rest of the jar, I am really careful to not leave so much in the pattern that I've made with the stamp on the clay. I don't want to fill in the indentions, but anywhere that I put the rooster or the flourishes, if there's any area that's kind of open that I didn't really make contact, I go ahead and make sure I get more paint in that area, because it actually will kind of cover up the creases and the holes if you have left anything open like that. And so here I'm just going back and painting with the salt wash mixture, adding another layer to really get a good coverage, to make that a little bit thicker. And it does kind of block the numbers a little bit. It camouflages them a little bit and blends in the edges of the clay. Sometimes I use my fingers to kind of smooth areas out. There's nothing more therapeutic than finger painting. And so I put it aside and let it dry. And now I'm using the DIY clear wax to put down a base coat onto the paint. And again, you add that clear wax as a base because you don't want too much to absorb if you're adding dark wax. If you wanted it to be finished, if you didn't want all the distressing to make it look aged, you could just put clear wax and leave it. But I want to put the dark wax in to show all the detail of the stamped clay and the rooster mold. So I add the dark wax and I work it into all the crevices, all the surface, and I just continue to cover it and let it sit for a minute. And after it's sat, I take a shop towel and I start wiping back all the excess, everything off the top surface. And I really just start getting in there. And at this point, I can actually be quite aggressive. Obviously, all the clay and paint are dry. The wax has been sitting. And whatever I want to remove, I have to wipe pretty aggressively. And so I keep doing that. And at one point, I will end up dipping my cloth into clear wax in order for me to sort of use it as an eraser. And so I just take some clear wax on the cloth and I go back over the places that I just want to take even more of the dark wax off of. And there you have it. It is complete, and I end up putting some ribbon around it and fill it. And we have a beautiful jar that could be used as a vase, or you could use it to put utensils or pencils in. I want to thank you for being here with me today, and let me know what you think about the projects. Make a comment, and I would love it if you would subscribe and like the video, maybe share it with your friends. And I hope you join me for my next upcoming video. Thanks so much for being here with me today.